The Annals and Antiquities of Rajasthan by Colonel James Todd. A selection of readings presented by Dr. Vijay Raul. History of Mewar, Part 4. Before we begin the reading from Todd's brief overview of Rana Sanga and the times that he lived in, let us take a quick look at who this illustrious Rajput warrior was and why he stands high in the list of the greatest heroes and protectors of the Hindu faith. Sangram Singh, popularly known as Rana Sanga or Maharana Sanga, was a Rajput ruler from the Sisodia dynasty. He ruled Mewar, the traditional territory of the Gohilats in present-day northwestern India. He was able to bring the kingdom of Mewar to its zenith by the gist of his tenacity and extreme prowess on the battlefield. He is largely regarded as the last Hindu Rajput monarch to have controlled a large swath of northern India, after the collapse of Prithviraj in Delhi and the onset of the Muslim rule. He controlled parts of present-day Rajasthan, Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh and Uttar Pradesh from his capital at Chittor. His reign was admired by several of his contemporaries, including Babur, who described him as the greatest Indian king of that time along with Krishnadeva Rai of South India. The Mughal historian Al-Badayuni calls Sanga the bravest of all Rajputs along with Prithviraj Chauhan. Rana Sanga was the last independent Hindu king of northern India to control a significant territory before the Mughal era and is often described as the Hindu emperor, Hindupti, of northern India. Rana Sanga is described to have lost one wrist in battle, he was blind in one eye, and his battle-worn body wore upwards of 80 scars from wounds received in the multitudes of skirmishes that he waged, mostly successfully during his reign. In his long military career, Sanga achieved a series of unbroken successes against several neighboring Muslim kingdoms, most notably the Lodi dynasty of Delhi. He united several Rajput clans for the first time since the Second Battle of Tarai and marched against the Timurid ruler Babur. Despite initial success, Sanga suffered a major defeat at Khanwa through the Timurids' use of gunpowder, which was unknown in North India at the time. He was later poisoned by his own nobles. His defeat at Khanwa is seen as a landmark event in the Mughal conquest of northern India. We will now commence our reading. History of Mewar, Part 4. Rana Sanga or Sangram Singh, 1508 to 1527 AD, Sangram, better known in the annals of Mewar as Sanga, called Shanka by the Mughal historians, succeeded in 1509 AD. With this prince Mewar reached the summit of her prosperity. To use their own metaphor, he was the Kalash on the pinnacle of her glory. From him we shall witness this glory on the wane, and though many rays of splendor illuminated her declining career, they served but to gild the ruin. The imperial chair, since occupied by the Tuar descendant of the Pandus, and the first and last of the Chauhans, and which had been filled successively by the dynasties of Gajni and Ghor, the Khilji and Lodi, was now shivered to pieces, and numerous petty thrones were constructed of its fragments. Mewar little dreaded these imperial puppets, when Amurat to Amurat succeeded, and when 4 kings reigned simultaneously between Delhi and Banaras. The kings of Malwa, though leagued with those of Gujarat, conjoined to the rebels, could make no impression on Mewar when Sanga led her heroes. 80,000 horse, 7 Rajas of the highest rank, 9 Raos, and 104 chieftains bearing the titles of Rawal and Rawat, with 500 war elephants, followed him into the field. The princes of Marwar and Amba did him homage, and the Raos of Gwalior, Ajmer, Sikri, Resin, Kalpi, Chanderi, Bundi, Gagron, Rampura, and Abu served him as tributaries or held of him in chief. Sanga did not forget those who sheltered him in his reverses. Karamchand of Srinagar had a grant of Ajmer and the title of Rao for his son Jagmal, the reward of his services in the reduction of Chanderi. The administration and wars of Rana Sanga, in a short space of time, Sanga entirely allayed the disorders occasioned by the intestine feuds of his family, and were it permitted to speculate on the cause which prompted a temporary cession of his rights and his dignities to his more impetuous brother, it might be discerned in a spirit of forecast and of fraternal and patriotic forbearance, a deviation from which would have endangered the country as well as the safety of his family. We may assume this, in order to account for an otherwise pusillanimous surrender of his birthright and being in contrast to all the subsequent heroism of his life, which, when he resigned, was contained within the wreck of a form. Sanga organized his forces, with which he always kept the field, an array called to contend with the descendant of Timur. He had gained 18 pitched battles against the kings of Delhi and Malwa. In 2 of these he was opposed by Ibrahim Lodi in person, at Bakrol and Ghatoli, in which last battle the imperial forces were defeated with great slaughter, leaving a prisoner of the blood royal to grace the triumph of Chittor. The Pilkhar, yellow rivulet, near Bayana became the northern boundary of Mewar, with the Sindh river to the east, touching Malwa to the south, while his native hills were an impenetrable barrier to the west. Thus swaying, directly or by control, the greater part of Rajasthan, and adored by the Rajputs for the possession of those qualities they hold in estimation, Sanga was ascending to the pinnacle of distinction, and had not fresh hordes of Uzbeks and Tatars from the prolific shores of the Oxus and Jaxarts again poured down on the devoted plains of Hindustan, the crown of the Chakravartin might again have encircled the brow of a Hindu, and the banner of supremacy been transferred from Indraprasth to the battlements of Chittor. But Babur arrived at a critical time to rally the dejected followers of the Koran, and to collect them around his own victorious standard. Invasions from Central Asia, from the earliest recorded periods of her history, India has been the prey of the more hardy population from the central regions of Asia. From this fact we may infer another, namely, that its internal form of government was the same as at the present day, partitioned into numerous petty kingdoms, of tribes and clans, of a feudal federation, a prey to all the jealousies inseparable from such a condition. The historians of Alexander bear ample testimony to such form of government, when the Punjab alone possessed many sovereigns, besides the democracies of cities. The Persians overrun it, and Darius the Mede accounted India the richest of his satrapies. The Greeks, the Parthians have left in their medals the best proofs of their power. The Geti or Yuti followed, and from the Ghori Shihabuddin to the Chagtai Babur, in less than 3 centuries, 5 invasions are recorded, each originating a dynasty. Sanga's opponent was the last, and will continue so until the race of knowledge renovate the ancient nursery of the human race, then may end the anomaly in the history of power, of a handful of Britons holding the succession to the Mede, the Parthian, and the Tatar. But, however surprise may be excited at witnessing such rapidity of change, from the physical superiority of man over man, it is immeasurably heightened at the little moral consequence which in every other region of the world has always attended such concussions. Creeds have changed, races have mingled, and names have been effaced from the page of history, but in this corner of civilization we have no such result, and the Rajput remains the same singular being, concentrated in his prejudices, political and moral, as in the days of Alexander, desiring no change himself, and still less to cause any in others. Whatever be the conservative principle, it merits a philosophic analysis, but more, a proper application and direction, by those to whom the destinies of this portion of the globe are confided, for in this remote spot there is a nucleus of energy, on which may accumulate a mass for our support or our destruction. To return, a descendant of the Turushka of the Jaxarts, the ancient foe of the children of Surya and Chandra, was destined to fulfill the prophetic Purana which foretold dominion to the Turushka, the Yavan, and other foreign races in Hind, and the conquered made a right application of the term Turk, both as regards its ancient and modern signification, when applied to the conquerors from Turkestan. Babur, the opponent of Sanga, was king of Ferghana and of Turki race. His dominions were on both sides the Jaksats, a portion of ancient Saktai, or Sagdvipa, Scythia, where dwelt Tomiris the Getic queen immortalized by Herodotus, and where her opponent erected Syropolis, as did in after times the Macedonian his most remote Alexandria. From this region did the same Geti, Jat, or Yuti, issue to the destruction of Bactria, 2 centuries before the Christian era, and also 5 subsequent thereto to found a kingdom in northern India. Again, 1000 years later, Babur issued with his bands to the final subjugation of India. As affecting India alone, this portion of the globe merits deep attention, but as the Officina Gentium, whence issued those hordes of Asi, Jats, or youths, of whom the angels were a branch, who peopled the shores of the Baltic, and the precursors of those goths who, under Attila and Alaric, altered the condition of Europe, its importance is vastly enhanced. But on this occasion it was not redundant population which made the descendant of Timur and Genghis abandon the Jaksats for the Ganges, but unsuccessful ambition, for Babur quitted the delights of Samarkand as a fugitive, and commenced his enterprise, which gave him the throne of the Pandus, with less than 2,000 adherents. Character of Babur, the Rajput prince had a worthy antagonist in the king of Ferghana. Like Sanga, he was trained in the school of adversity, and like him, though his acts of personal heroism were even romantic, he tempered it with that discretion which looks to its results. In 1494 AD, at the tender age of 12, he succeeded to a kingdom. Before he was 16 he defeated several confederacies and conquered Samarkand, and in 2 short years again lost and regained it. His life was a tissue of successes and reverses, at one moment hailed lord of the chief kingdoms of Transoxiana, at another flying, unattended, or putting all to hazard in desperate single combats, in one of which he slew 5 champions of his enemies. Driven at length from Ferghana, in despair he crossed the Hindu Kush, and in 1519, the Indus. Between the Punjab and Kabul he lingered 7 years, before he advanced to measure his sword with Ibrahim of Delhi. Fortune returned to his standard. Ibrahim was slain, his army routed and dispersed, and Delhi and Agra opened their gates to the fugitive king of Ferghana. His reflections on success evince it was his due, not to me, O God, but to thee, be the victory, says the chivalrous Babur. A year had elapsed in possession of Delhi, before he ventured against the most powerful of his antagonists, Rana Sanga of Chittor. Ruins of the fortress of Baina. With all Babur's qualities as a soldier, supported by the hardy clans of the Cloud Mountains, Bilat Tag, of Kartagin, the chances were many that he and they terminated their career on the yellow rivulet of Bayana. Neither bravery nor skill saved him from this fate, which he appears to have expected. What better proof can be desired than Babur's own testimony to the fact that a horde of invaders from the Jaksats, without support or retreat, were obliged to entrench themselves to the teeth in the face of their Rajput foe, alike brave and overpowering in numbers? To ancient jealousies he was indebted for not losing his life instead of gaining a crown, and for being extricated from a condition so desperate that even the frenzy of religion, which made death martyrdom in this holy war, scarcely availed to expel the despair which so infected his followers, that in the bitterness of his heart he says there was not a single person who uttered a manly word, nor an individual who delivered a courageous opinion. The Battle of Khanwa, March 16, 1527, Babur advanced from Agra and Sikri to oppose Rana Sanga, in full march to attack him at the head of almost all the princes of Rajasthan. Although the Annals state some points which the imperial historian has not recorded, yet both accounts of the conflict correspond in all the essential details. On the 5th of Kartik, 1528 AD, according to the Annals, the Rana raised the siege of Bayana, and at Khanwa encountered the advanced guard of the Tatars, amounting to 1,500 men, which was entirely destroyed, the fugitives carrying to the main body the accounts of the disaster, which paralyzed their energies and made them entrench for security, instead of advancing with the confidence of victory. Reinforcements met the same fate and were pursued to the camp. Accustomed to reverses, Babur met the check without dismay and adopted every precaution that a mind fertile in expedients could suggest, reassuring the drooping spirits of his troops. He threw up entrenchments, in which he placed his artillery, connecting his guns by chains, and in the more exposed parts chevaux de frise, united by leather ropes, a precaution continued in every subsequent change of position. Everything seemed to aid the Hindu cause. Even the Tatar astrologer asserted that as Mars was in the west, whoever should engage coming from the opposite quarter should be defeated. In this state of total inactivity, blockaded in his encampment, Babur remained near a fortnight, when he determined to renounce his besetting sin and merit superior aid to extricate himself from his peril. The naivete of his vow must be given in his own words. But the destruction of the wine flasks would appear only to have added to the existing consternation, and made him, as a last resort, appeal to their faith. Having addressed them in a speech of manly courage, though bordering on despair, he seized the happy moment that his exhortation elicited, to swear them on the Koran to conquer or perish. Profiting by this excitement, he broke up his camp, to which he had been confined nearly a month, and marched in order of battle to a position 2 miles in advance, the Rajputs skirmishing up to his guns. Without regular circumvallation, his movable palisades and guns chained, he felt no security. The inactivity of Sanga can scarcely escape censure. However, we may incline to palliate it by supposing that he deemed his enemy in the toils, and that every day's delay brought with it increased danger to him. Such reasoning would be valid if the heterogeneous mass by which the Prince of Mewar was surrounded had owned the same patriotic sentiments as himself, but he ought to have known his countrymen, nor overlooked the regulating maxim of their ambition: get land. Delay was fatal to this last coalition against the force of his race. Babur is silent on the point to which the Annals ascribe their discomfiture, a negotiation pending his blockade at Khanwa, but these have preserved it, with the name of the traitor who sold the cause of his country. The negotiation had reached this point, that on condition of Babur being left Delhi and its dependencies, the Pilkhal at Bayana should be the boundary of their respective dominions, and even an annual tribute was offered to the Rana. We can believe that in the position Babur then was, he would not scruple to promise anything. The chief of racing, by name Salehdi, of the Tuar tribe, was the medium of communication, and though the arrangement was negatived, treason had effected the salvation of Babur. On March 16 the attack commenced by a furious onset on the center and right wing of the Tatars, and for several hours the conflict was tremendous. Devotion was never more manifest on the side of the Rajput, attested by the long list of noble names amongst the slain as well as the bulletin of their foe, whose artillery made dreadful havoc in the close ranks of the Rajput cavalry, which could not force the entrenchments, nor reach the infantry which defended them. While the battle was still doubtful, the Tuar traitor who led the van, Harwal, went over to Babur, and Sanga was obliged to retreat from the field, which in the onset promised a glorious victory, himself severely wounded and the choicest of his chieftains slain, Rawal Uday Singh of Dungarpur, with 200 of his clan, Ratna of Salumbar, with 300 of his Chondavat kin, Raimal Rathor, son of the Prince of Marwar, with the brave Mersha leaders Khetsi and Ratna, Ramdas the Sonigira, Rao, Uja the Jhala, Gokuldas Parmara, Manikchand and Chandarbhan, Chauhan chiefs of the first rank in Mewar, besides a host of inferior names. Hasan Khan of Mewat, and a son of the last Lodi king of Delhi, who coalesced with Sanga, were amongst the killed. Triumphal pyramids were raised of the heads of the slain, and on a hillock which overlooked the field of battle a tower of skulls was erected, and the conqueror assumed the title of Razi, which has ever since been retained by his descendants. The death of Rana Sanga, Sanga retreated towards the hills of Mewar, having announced his fixed determination never to re-enter Chittor but with victory. Had his life been spared to his country, he might have redeemed the pledge, but the year of his defeat was the last of his existence, and he died at Baswa, on the frontier of Mewar, not without suspicion of poison. It is painful to record the surmise that his ministers prompted the deed, and the cause is one which would fix a deep stain on the country, namely, the purchase by regicide of inglorious ease and stipulated safety, in preference to privations and dangers, and to emulating the manly constancy of their prince, who resolved to make the heavens his canopy till his foe was crushed, a determination which was pursued with the most resolute perseverance by some of his gallant successors. Appearance of Rana Sanga. Sanga Rana was of the middle stature, but of great muscular strength, fair in complexion, with unusually large eyes, which appear to be peculiar to his descendants. He exhibited at his death but the fragments of a warrior. One eye was lost in the broil with his brother, an arm in an action with the Lodi king of Delhi, and he was a cripple owing to a limb being broken by a cannonball in another, while he counted 80 wounds from the sword or the lance on various parts of his body. He was celebrated for energetic enterprise, of which his capture of Muzaffar, king of Malwa, in his own capital, is a celebrated instance, and his successful storm of the almost impregnable Ranthambore, though ably defended by the imperial general Ali, gained him great renown. He erected a small palace at Khanua, on the line which he determined should be the northern limit of Mewar, and had he been succeeded by a prince possessed of his foresight and judgment, Babur's descendants might not have retained the sovereignty of India. A cenotaph long marked the spot where the fire consumed the remains of this celebrated prince. Sanga had 7 sons, of whom the 2 elder died in non-age. He was succeeded by the 3rd son, Rana Ratan Singh.